Right, let's get into the news. Former CIA operative, author and activist, allegedly, Valerie Plame said this week that she's considering a 2020 run for a US congressional seat in New Mexico. Of course, Plame told the Associated Press she's spending time with residents and make a decision on that soon. Now, the seat is currently held by the Democratic US Representative Ben Ray Lujan, who is stepping down to run for the US Senate. And Valerie Plame says at the moment she's just going around and meeting people. I have a lot to learn and would like another opportunity to serve my country. Now, for those of you with longer memories of Valerie Plame, she became a national figure after her identity as a CIA operative was leaked by an official in the President George W. Bush administration back in 2003 in an effort to discredit her then husband, Joe Wilson. Now, Wilson is a former diplomat who criticised Bush's decision to invade Iraq. Now, Valerie Plame left the agency, allegedly. I don't think those people really leave. Back in 2005. Now, I did a piece a number of months ago where I outed 4 or 5 former CIA people running for seats. This is another one. I did warn of ex-Langley becoming politicians, and is that a good thing or is it a bad thing? You decide. Mr. Nutty Asshole Netanyahu, speaking days before the recent Israeli primary elections, said he is considering formally annexing certain Jewish settlements in the occupied West Bank. In an interview he did, Mr. Netanyahu promised to annex Israeli settlements if elected for another term this coming week. He said, "You are asking whether we are moving on to the next stage." Interesting word. And the answer is yes, we will move on to the next stage, and I'm going to extend Israel's sovereignty. He went on to say that each settlement is Israeli and he will not hand it over to a Palestinian sovereignty. The Prime Minister also told journalists that he would not divide Jerusalem. Really? You already have. And would make sure we control the territory west of Jordan. Now, the right-wing politician also argued against the two-state solution by saying that a Palestinian state would endanger our existence. Earlier, Netanyahu said he made it clear to Mr. Trump that he was not ready to evacuate a single person from the West Bank settlements, as all the settlements, without exception, those that are in blocks and those that aren't, need to remain under Israeli sovereignty. And he also told Trump that any US reconciliation plan for Israel and Palestine must not include the removal of the settlements from the occupied Palestinian lands. He went on to say, as far as I'm concerned, the evacuation won't be in there, and if it is, it won't happen. Adding that Tel Aviv insists on continued control over territories west of the Jordan River, which is the West Bank, and asked about the hoped-for US recognition of Israel's sovereignty over the West Bank, Netanyahu says wait until the next term. At the same time, he praised Trump as the best friend Israel had. Well, obviously that selection has already taken place, and given the polls, it seems that they have a Florida 2000 voting problem, as it appears Mr. Netanyahu has been given a 5th term. Either that, or the people are not very bright over there, or they've been programmed into oblivion. The fallout and the issues regarding Huawei and 5G continue And the reason being is there is no American alternative. None. And it appears Washington has tried to scare other Western countries into dropping the Chinese telecoms giant from supplying all the 5G network equipment, claiming Beijing would capture any data transferred through Huawei devices at will. Really? We've got CIA and NSA and DHS and FBI and everyone else spying. Never mind the Five Eyes. But both Germany and the UK refused to bar Huawei from participating in tenders, with Berlin publicly rebuking Washington by saying that it has its own security standards. So, or was it just the case because America has no 5G provider of its own to match up with the might of Huawei, and other countries around the world would have become increasingly reliant on them? Time will tell. Also related to spying, there has been a short piece in the EU. What people don't recognise or may not know is the EU tried to break up Microsoft back in the 90s, which turned out to be a futile exercise. But the assault on American tech giants by European lawmakers, both in Brussels and through national governments, is on an entirely different scale currently. And from trying to regulate Facebook and Twitter's content, monitoring Amazon's tax practices, to harrying Google, or Google, the correct term, for abusing its dominant position and levying a record $5 billion fine, the European Union has set itself up for years in the courtrooms against the American giants' legal teams. And the US is asking France not to tax US tech companies to stay in competition with the Chinese. Next piece. The world's top global weapons exporter, has long been able to rely on its supplies to military allies as a reliable income stream, except that's about to change. And this is why the American suspension of its F-35 supplies to Turkey in protest against Turkey's purchase of Russia's S-400 missile defence system has provoked concerns that go beyond the monetary. If more allies, and particularly non-NATO states such as Saudi Arabia, drop their cast-iron loyalty to American weapons and look for options that are, quite frankly, better value for money, that overcharged and overpriced, this could force the US government to spend even more money propping up its successful but complacent giants like Lockheed Martin and Boeing. Of course, Boeing has other problems of its own recently. And more concerning still is that while NATO countries continue to lag in their defence spending, the countries where defence budgets are ballooning the fastest, which is China, India and Russia, are either not dependent on American supplies or actively opposed to them. Whereas 25 years ago, it looked like all of the major economies would eventually join America's world order, it looks now like the other hemisphere is forging its own path. What happens when no one wants to buy anything? Big problem. And this is why, in my opinion, we have to close all borders and clear out the mess, and let's rebuild from within, and then trade with the rest of the world. We have the facilities to do that, and we have the support financially to do that also. Donald Trump has revoked the executive order requiring public reports on civilian casualties in drone strikes that are carried out by the CIA as well as the US military. The new executive order issued on Wednesday revokes the reporting requirement introduced by Barack Obama back in 2016. The action required the Director of National Intelligence to release an unclassified summary of US strikes against terrorists outside areas of active hostilities, an assessment of non-combatant deaths caused by those strikes. Now, the Pentagon still has an obligation to report on civilian casualties caused by the US military operations, and it is mandated by the National Defense Authorization Acts of 2018 and 19, which was noted in Trump's executive order. And in a statement commenting on the decision, the White House National Security Council said the order removes reporting requirements that distract our intelligence professionals from their primary mission. Not very transparent, is it? Now, cancelling the reports will allow the Pentagon to conduct military engagements without any accountability, according to Brian Becker, the national coordinator of the Anti-War Answer Coalition. And during the last few years with the use of drones, in trying to take out 41 men with links to terror groups, US drones killed an estimated 1,147 people. The EPA's highest paid employee and leading expert on climate change was sentenced this week to 32 months in federal prison on Wednesday for lying to his bosses, saying he was a CIA spy working in Pakistan so he could avoid doing his real job. Yeah, right. John C. Beale's crimes were inexplicable and unbelievably egregious, said Judge Ellen Hovell in imposing the sentence in Washington, D.C. federal court. Now, Mr. Beale has agreed to pay $1.3 million in restitution and forfeiture to the government. Beale said he was ashamed of his lies about working for the CIA, a ruse that, according to court records, began back in 2000 and continued until early this year. So he was asked why did he do it. He replied, greed, simple greed, and I'm ashamed of that greed. And he also said it was possible he got a rush and a sense of excitement by telling people he worked for the CIA. It was something like an addiction, yeah. Cocaine in America, yeah. That's a proper addiction. Anyway, he pled guilty in September to bilking the government out of nearly $1 million in salary and other benefits over a decade, and he perpetuated his fraud largely by failing to show up at the EPA for months at a time, including one 18-month stretch starting in June 2011 when he did absolutely no work. And no one noticed. When the judge asked Beale what he was doing when he claimed he was working for the CIA, he said, I spent my time exercising and a lot of the time working on the house. He also said he used the time to trying to find ways to fine-tune the capitalist system to discourage companies from damaging the environment. Yeah, right. Now, the prosecutor said Beale's crimes made him a poster child for what is wrong with government. Here, 18 months at the EPA, and no one says anything. Never turned up. Hold this piece in your head for a later op-ed piece, because maybe this case is more than is being portrayed. we do? This next bit is highlighting a discourse in Colombia, not District of Columbia, the country Colombia, and a group that goes by the name of HETQ, HETQ, which explores whether the Gardasil vaccine imported to Armenia really works. Now, the vaccine is supposed to prevent HPV, and the most commonly sexual transmitted disease. Now, HETQ contacted Mario Jimenez, who is a journalist and a researcher in Colombia, who has raised concerns about the side effects of Gardasil, and who is now assisting attorneys prosecuting the collective action lawsuit, which has now been filed by 700 women in that country, demanding some $160 million in compensation from the company known as Merck, which is the vaccine's provider. Now, the vaccine against HPV was introduced in Colombia in 2013 in a rather strange fashion. Congress created a law 1626, which was approved on April 30th, 2013, stating that the vaccine against HPV was free and mandatory to the target population. And the government spent close to $100 million on vaccines and started the vaccination program. $100 million. A lot of money, that, in American terms, never mind. Colombia, probably the most well-off financial country, but this is what they do. So the vaccination program started, in which neither the families nor the vaccinated girls had a word to say about it. Mandatory. So the vaccine was mandatory for girls from the 4th to 7th grade, and also include the ages 9 through 17. Now, the girls were vaccinated at their schools. They never received an informed consent to sign, and there was no chance to refuse the vaccine. And the vaccination program established a quota of vaccination that had to be met. A bit like cops and speeding tickets, is it not? If you don't meet the quota, just pull anyone over. However, after a lawsuit, the Constitutional Court of Colombia issued an amendment to the law stating the vaccine wasn't mandatory, and that if a person wanted to refuse it, it was their right, all after the event. And that there was a right to informed consent. Well, why didn't the court issue that before it was started? Now, the Freedom of Information Act detailing reports of adverse reactions to the vaccine for the HPV Gardasil, and the adverse reactions reports details 26 new deaths were reported within the space of 1 year, between 2010 and 2011, as well as incidents of seizures, paralysis, blindness, pancreatitis, speech problems, short-term memory loss, and Guillain-Barré syndrome, all before the government forced that on those girls 2 years later. Now, the documents come from the FDA's Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, which is used by the FDA to monitor the safety of vaccines. Much use they are. And the documents were obtained pursuant to a September the 15th, 2011 Freedom of Information request for reports made from September 2010 through September 2011. And one of them is of the adverse effects also was early menopause, where there's a premature ovarian failure in the affected girls and they had become sterile, which is probably the reason for using that product to begin with. There are close to 1,000 girls that have been affected by the vaccine in Colombia, and about 700 of them are being represented in the case against Merck. We're off to Britain next. The company who are being paid to cut down thousands of trees in the city of Sheffield in the UK to make way for 5G. I think it's time we had a little expose of them. You'll hear familiar names. Amey, A-M-E-Y, was founded back in 1921 by William Charles Amey, who was an Oxfordshire-based quarry operator. And the company grew during World War II with its involvement in the construction of a Royal Air Forces base. Now we see where these companies all come in. In April 2003, it was acquired by Ferrovial. It was a Spanish company, but continues to trade under the Amey name. Now, from 2003 to May 2010, listen closely, the company jointly owned with Bechtel. Oh my. And the consortium were responsible for the maintenance, renewal and upgrade of the infrastructure of the tube lines, including the track, trains, signals, civil work and the stations on 3 London Underground lines. Wasn't there bombings on those lines sometime during then? Now, following a funding shortfall at the business, it was bought from Amey and Bechtel by Transport for London. Now, in February 2006, Amey acquired the highway and railway design consultancy Owen Williams, allowing it to substantially grow its business and develop its own consultancy division. It then acquired the rail consultancy arm of WYG Engineering in 2010, the Transportation Planning International Limited in February 2011, Aquatech Engineering in 2014, and in 2013 Amey completed the acquisition of utilities, waste and public service providers Enterprise PLC. You're getting the picture now. In January 2016, Amey then acquired Travel Point Trading, a strategic asset management consultancy with a strong presence in the rail sector in the United Kingdom. In February 2018, Amey purchased Carillion's rail contracts with Network Rail in the East Midlands, London and the North West, following Carillion's liquidation in January. Carillion are the group that run the British government, I might add. The government doesn't run the government. They give it to private security groups to run it, and Carillion were one of them. It appears this company is now the new one. Now, the purchase of Carillion saved about 700 jobs. In August 2018, Amey completed the acquisition of the Ministry of Defence housing maintenance contracts, which was previously run in joint venture with Carillion. Rail. I've lost track of how many they're actually involved in. In December 2018, press reports said Ferrovial had put Amey up for sale. Ferrovial have posted a net loss of €72 million for the first half of 2018 after allocating €237 million for losses on Amy's highway maintenance contract with Birmingham City Council. Amy also lost €48 million on the M8 motorway upgrade in Scotland, and in February this year Amy was reported close to a deal enabling it to exit its Birmingham highway maintenance contract, and liabilities from which were preventing the sale of the company by Ferrovial, who slashed the value of it by $660 million, saying the fair value of Amy in the United Kingdom was $88 million. This is how countries get taken over. Citadel, Weiss Company, Blackwater. These people are all insiders getting backhanded contracts from the government, but it's not really from the government at all. These are private contractors that are running the government, whether people like that idea or not. Still in the UK, the chief executive of the company which owns British Gas received a 44% rise in his pay last year to $2.4 million. This is why we did the People's Club plan. Sorry, no CEO is worth $2.4 million a year, period. And it means Ian Conn, who app name Con, runs Centrica, is paid 72 times that of an employee in the lower quartile of its salary range. 72 times more. And a smart energy expert who is paid £33,700 a year. And the deal, which is roughly about $46,000. And the pay deal comes in what the company described as a challenging year. And after it warned profits this year would be hit by the energy price cap. So profits were hit and his pay goes up 44%. Is that really how things work? Now the energy price cap rose to £1,254 at the start of April. Mr. Conn's pay rose from $1.7 million because he did not receive a bonus that year. Ooh, like he needs one. While in 2016 he received a bonus of $4 million. And you wonder why your gas prices are so high. Now in the annual report, Centrica said Mr. Conn had been reshaping the company against the challenge of a constantly shifting operating environment. And he was kind of praised that he was shown significant resilience in the face of this challenge and has led the business through a shifting context, keeping the strategic objectives in sight and ensuring that the organisation remains adaptable and innovative. All corporate bollocks, that to me. Now the company's shares fell to near 20-year lows after the warning in February that profits would be knocked by Ofgem's price cap amid fears it would cut its dividends. And a year ago, Mr. Conn had announced 4,000 job cuts. Bye-bye 4,000 people, hello £700,000 pay rise. British Gas had lost near 750,000 energy supply accounts last year, as it rarely appears to be amongst the cheapest deals on price comparison websites when customers are looking to switch suppliers. Last month, the energy company Shell said its chief executive, Ben van Beurden, pay was 143 times larger than that of the average Shell employee in the UK. That nonsense has to stop. Last piece before we go into a few questions and then a sub-intel section before the intel. Now, following on from an earlier news item which we covered of employees of Go Ogle, because that's what they do, they go and ogle at what you're doing. We're questioning their company's mode of operations. Well, today another group of a major employer has, in an unprecedented move, this time at Amazon. More than 3,500 of the company's corporate employees signed their names to a letter published yesterday that has urged Jeff Bezos to create a comprehensive climate change plan for the company. Now, in the letter, which was published online and addressed to the Amazon CEO and also Amazon's board of directors, it called for a company-wide plan backed by 6 principles, and they include a complete transition away from fossil fuels rather than relying on carbon offsets, and a prioritization of climate impact when making business decisions. People are standing up. 3,500 there. I forget how many had complained about Go Ogle and their links with the military contractors. But it's a sign that people are taking notice and are beginning to fight back, and it's a good move.